Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Real Melodies. Hope you all have had a good week. I've had an okay week. Had a little bit of a cold this week, as you know.
We are roommates, by the way.
Yes, fun fact. But yeah, here in Ohio, fall has already come to our doorstep and then said goodbye. We had what we call first fall, and now we are in second summer. Hoping the second summer goes by quickly so that I can justify wearing a hoodie and sweatpants.
It'll be about 80 off and on until November, and then it won't really get hot until April or May because it doesn't make any type of sense.
Yeah, there's a solid chance we'll get just like random snow in the middle of October though, and then it'll be 75 the next day. So
Ohio weather is just a big grab bag. They're reaching in and seeing what happens.
the weather variety pack.
Yes. And everybody should notice if you watched this last week, wonderful. Welcome back. If not, we're happy to see you. This is only episode 2, so it's still pretty early on, but we're trying to go a little bit more production value. We have 3 different cameras. 1, the main camera, 2 on Jake, and then 3 on me. We're somewhere.
Something like that. Yeah, we got 3 cameras now.
So we're trying to do a little bit more dynamic with how we're doing this.
Definitely.
But, let's jump right into what we were talking about.
Yeah, so this week, as you probably know, we will be talking about the soundtrack to the movie Tarzan from 1999. This soundtrack was written by drummer and lead singer of Genesis, also solo career person, Phil Collins. Not to be confused with Phil Collin, the lead guitarist of Led Zeppelin.
I didn't even realize.
Very similar names. But yes, Phil Collins with an S on the end. Before we get into the soundtrack, I want to talk about Phil Collins a little bit.
Okay.
So first of all, born in 1951, so he is now 70 years old. As far as I know, he's still with us. I want to make sure that I'm not wrong in saying that.
Last I've heard, yes.
Yes, he is still with us. He obviously had a career with Genesis as their drummer and lead singer. Also had a solo career with Genesis. A couple of his well-known songs that y'all may have heard are "Misunderstanding" and "That's All." And was the one from American Psycho? Was that a solo one?
I want to say it is. Studio is what that is, and we'll get to why I associate it with American Psycho. But isn't it Land of Confusion's the other big one?
Yes, Land of Confusion's. Yeah, that's personal favorite of mine actually. Yeah. And, of course, from his solo career, he's got a couple hits, but everybody knows the drum riff from In the Air Tonight. Do-do, 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 do. And, so Phil Collins is obviously a very talented guy. Oddly enough, 2 weeks in a row here, we're talking about music from movies that have to do with drummer/singers, because last week we had Dave Grohl.
Yeah, we did.
And I just kind of realized that. Because it's the thing, it's like you don't see that all that often where the drummer is the lead singer. Now you do see some cases where, Ringo Starr might have sung, or was it Karen Carter of the Carters? Okay. She was also the drummer, she sang. But it's not a super common thing to have your drummer be your lead singer. Which is just kind of a cool thing about Phil Collins. And but yeah, so you have anything else to say about him? Anything? The American Psycho stuff.
Yeah, so Studio, a lot of his songs are very catchy, and they are very much in Tarzan too. He's a pop artist, he does a really good job. Some people aren't really huge fans of his. I like him a fair amount, but I want to say it's Studio they use in American Psycho during a scene that I can't really speak about what it is, because it's kind of an adult situation, but the contrast between that happy pop song and then what's happening in that scene is very, very memorable. American Psycho has a lot of those, and I hope we'll talk about that at some point, but
yeah,
even before Tarzan, when I think of Phil Collins, as far as movie stuff goes, I automatically jump to Mary Harron's movie from 2000.
Yeah. No, I've never seen American Psycho. I'm sure that's one we'll eventually talk about on the podcast here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think we did talk about it the other day. The scene with the Huey Lewis song in it.
Hip to be square.
Yes. And this is going to make me sound extremely uncultured. The main reason I know about that scene is from American Dad. They spoofed that scene, and Roger is the one with with the axe or the knife or whatever it is. And I don't know why I find that so funny.
Yeah.
But just to have the alien dude with the axe about to just it's a whole vibe. absolutely hilarious, and I'm sure in the movie it's terrifying, but also hilarious.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But yeah, so let's get into it here. A little bit about the Tarzan soundtrack. You want to talk about the movie a little bit? Some of the
Sure, yeah. So we were looking into this. It came out in '99. It's by the Walt Disney Corporation. We watched it on our Disney Plus. We have that. The budget was $130 million, which
seems astronomical.
and it absolutely blows out of the water both the movies we talked about last week.
Yeah.
I want to say they were both under 10 million, if I remember correctly, or under 20 million.
I think it was under 20.
It was under 20 million for Tenacious D and Cold War, both of them. So this is a lot of money. It grossed $448 million, so it definitely made the money back. It was a big hit when it came out.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a little bit too young to remember that. We're both we're born in '98, so
Yeah.
we were not nearly old enough to have much of a recollection of this movie when it came out, but it was interesting that we looked at it. It made back its money just in the U.S. and Canada. It was $170 million, which I know this, as far as box office numbers go, you want to at least double your budget. If you haven't doubled your budget, even if you made more, it's generally considered not necessarily a dud, but if it's really going to be a roaring success, you need to at least double.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But this definitely did. It's a catchy movie. It's a lot of fun, and I had a good time with it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a movie that I remember watching as a kid, obviously after it came out. But I told you I had not seen in so long, and it genuinely is a pretty solid movie. You know, it's not the best to come out of Disney, but the movie itself is pretty solid, and you know the overlying message that comes out at the end of it is a pretty solid message. Now, we do have to say there are a couple, not so much innuendos, but more just kind of slightly racial, unacceptable allusions, I guess.
Yeah, that's inherently kind of a thing with Tarzan on its own. The original novel was written in 1912 by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And obviously, 109 years ago, things are a lot different than they are now. The movie does have a long history cinematically with a lot of portrayals before it in like the 30s and 40s. Johnny Weissmuller is who I think originally played him. Here's a little bit of an anecdote. There's an old cartoon that's available on YouTube. It's called The Stars at Night or something. We'll link it in the description of this video. And it's a kind of a satire of Hollywood royalty in the 40s and all these people who are really big. And at one point, Johnny Weissmuller comes in and he's got this really nice suit jacket on, like as an overcoat. And the person who's taking his coat at the coat check is like, "Oh, hi, Mr. Weissmuller," and he takes it off and he's got this tiny thong that's got like leopard print on it, and that's the only thing he has, and then a bow tie.
Fantastic.
And he's absolutely built like a tank.
Very much like pre-Magic Mike.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the bow tie.
Yeah, but this movie does have some elements that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable as far as what specifically was being told in the story, and that kind of, it's with the source material.
Yeah, and like the overall overlying message that, you know, kind of pokes his head out at the end. You know, you should accept everybody for who they are, and you know, if somebody, like in the beginning of the movie, when Tarzan, you know, before he's named Tarzan, you know, his parents are killed by that leopard, and I know he has a name, and I already forget it. But you know, that baby was in a very helpless situation, needed help, and when somebody needs help, you should help them. I mean, that's not a political thing. That's not a religious thing. That's just the right way to go about it, I think. And that the two ideas of, you know, if somebody needs help, you help them, and accepting people for who they are two very like just important things, I think, that, you know, it really shouldn't take movies to get that message out there, but at the same time it works to put them in movies.
Sure.
There's one thing that who's the gorilla that's like not really the antagonist, but he's the one. Is it Kerchak is his name?
Yes,
the one
it's
that
Kerchak. Yeah.
He did. So he's the one that doesn't want to welcome Tarzan into their family because he's different and he thinks he's gonna, you know, put them in danger.
Yeah.
And there's at least one time where he says something along the line of he's not one of us, and just straight up says something like that. And it could be, you could read way into this, but when it comes down to it, it is just the fact that he's different than us, so we shouldn't welcome him into our society, into our family, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
Now,
we promised we were going to talk about Phil Collins soon. We just wanted to get this out of the way.
There's some stuff in the movie we just wanted to kind of hit on a little bit.
Because this is important in how the music fits into this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And where was I going with that? I already lost my train of thought. Kerchak.
They do make up. Unfortunately, spoilers, Kerchak does get killed by a white hunter who comes in at one point.
Yes.
But they do make up, and he, tells Tarzan, you're going to be in charge of this group of our family.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right. So now that we've gotten past that, let's move into the music a little bit. So the first thing right off the bat, with the first song in the movie, which is, I think, one of the versions of the Two Worlds. Was it Two Worlds, One Heart or something like that?
Yeah.
So, ironically enough, it's similar to what we talked about last week. But
there was a song in Cold War called Two Hearts, Four Eyes that they sang a bunch of times.
So there's the first thing I hear is like a very, very a very driving, moving forward drum beat, and I can hear that there's obviously a drum set, but there's also some drums that come from the African society.
A little bit larger than just society.
Yes, kind of good. Yes.
Yeah.
See,
we live in a society, by the way.
Yes, we live in this. Okay. Yes. Anywho,
that was a joke.
But anyways, so like one or two of these that are most likely in there, again, don't quote me on this because I was unable to find like the actual instrumentation for a lot of these, but there's a solid chance there's two drums that are going to be included in this: is a djembe and a talking drum.
Okay.
And a talking drum, I'm a personal fan of, because if I was taught correctly at music school, you sort of hold it under your side, and as you hit it, you squeeze or let go, and there's these like ropes that are attached to the head of the drum, and it like does this sort of thing.
Okay.
And the djembe is one that is typically held between your legs, and if you want to deaden the sound, you put the bottom all the way flat. If you want to liven up the sound, take your foot and pick up the side. And then obviously where you hit on the drum makes a difference too.
Okay.
But those are most likely present in the first song and throughout a lot of the soundtrack as well. And it sort of fits into, I'm not sure if there's like an actual name for this type of music. I would almost consider it to be called like jungle pop. Like,
is that the term that's used pretty often when they're talking about what that is?
See, I feel like I've heard that term before, but I couldn't tell you where.
Okay.
It's just like, our version of American pop music, or even in this case, like 80s, early 90s pop music, or like the pop rock crossover, kind of like Genesis was.
Yeah. With
a couple African or, jungle-esque instruments thrown in, like your djembe and your talking drum.
Instruments reminiscent of what you would expect to hear in that setting.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yes. Yeah. And this is not just something like, to hear those instruments in that setting is not just something we're assuming. There is a long history of drums being used specifically in African music, which is where the movie Tarzan is supposed to take place. It's used for celebration, for communication, for life, for death. They are very prominent in their not in just their music, but in their life. I also have written down here too, they combine it with brass and strings as well. So it kind of brings three styles of music and puts them all together, which is kind of a cool mashup.
And kind of building off of that, the score feels appropriately heroic for really what the movie is. Mm-hmm. This kind of ties into, I know we'd spoken about this prior. You look at kind of like late romanticism right before the early 20th century. A lot of that music is what you use in a lot of scores nowadays too, mm-hmm. because it has a full orchestra versus, something like Psycho, which is very pared down and is all strings. But mm-hmm. a large orchestra, a variety of instruments, using them impressionistically, which mm-hmm. at one point there is a trombone, is what I think it is, that's supposed to be a hippo going through the water.
Yep.
And it's what they call Mickey Mousing, which is funny enough, it's a Disney movie. It's the term for it I've heard is Mickey Mousing, when you have something that's in time with what's happening. If like somebody's stomping and you hear like a really big beat of whatever. That's an example of that. But the score feels appropriately heroic for what this is, because prior, I want to say, if not prior, around the same time as the original Superman and Batman serials, is when you would see these Tarzan movies in the golden age of Hollywood. So Tarzan was sort of a proto-superhero, way before Christopher Reeve or Michael Keaton or any of the stuff you see from DC or Marvel today. It was kind of originally Tarzan and these other people who lived in areas that weren't just the city or wherever, and had certain powers and had dominion over whoever they were around. Like these superior people, if that makes any type of sense. And the superhero goes all the way back to Gilgamesh, if you want to look at how it's portrayed in media, so to speak. The ancient Sumerian texts are very much a form of media, so it extends all the way from that to whatever you would look at nowadays. But Tarzan's pretty early on. You know, originally it was written in 1912, the book was. So the type of music that they're using in the score is reminiscent of what you would hear as a popular music in about 1912.
Yeah, definitely.
It fits pretty well.
Yeah. And then moving on to like the second one, this was one, I think one of the more well-known ones from this movie was The Son of Man.
Yeah. It's a good song.
An absolute bop. I will 100% agree with that. It was, if I remember correctly, it definitely had some like elements of like a musical theater piece. Just in the way that the text fit into the music. It just sounded very, very musical theater-esque. It didn't sound super poppy or anything like that. And of course, like you got this one in particular, I don't think I heard any sort of, African drum in this one. This one was set in stone. It had with drum set, guitars, had strings, and a keyboard. Which is, pretty, that there is sort of is like typically what you're going to get for a musical theater thing, for like a pit orchestra typically, especially for modern musicals. You're going to have maybe a string quartet and a string bass, oftentimes a guitar or two, a bass guitar, a drum set, and a piano.
Okay. So
the instrumentation sort of lines up there as well. And back to the talking about like the actual score part outside of the soundtrack. The scene where Tarzan kills the leopard that keeps coming back. That part, that was one that I wrote down specific that just did sound very, very, like, it wasn't like this cheesy triumphant, like, ba, 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 like that, something huge, but it just, the feeling you got from that part just gave you a feeling of triumph without doing it cheesy, corny,
very upbeat for the most part in this movie.
Yes.
A lot of it is indicative of adventure, which again fits perfectly in with what the story and what the prior movies, which we'll talk a little bit more about the prior movies, kind of would be provocative of at the time.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see here. Oh, before we move on to the movie, there's more stuff inside the movie of the music wise. One thing I did want to talk about, this soundtrack itself went all the way up to number 5 on Billboard charts in 1999.
Really?
Or maybe 2000, I guess, as late as it came out.
Sure.
In when did it come out in 99? I guess
I admittedly don't know.
Give me just a second here to look that up. But like I said, it did raise itself all the way up to the number 5 spot in the Billboard charts. June 18th, so there was a pretty solid chance it did raise to that number 5 in the Billboard charts before the end of 99.
Yeah, probably.
And it probably happened in June or July.
Sure.
Care to take a guess on how many copies of that were sold worldwide? Mind you, this is before any sort of streaming service, and everybody and their brother had, it was... late 90s, probably CD players, most likely. If I had to guess,
they had CD players. CD players,
yeah. How many copies did they sold?
100 million.
Oh, nah, not that many.
7.
But
8.
2 million.
That's a lot.
586,000. So
that's a lot.
Over 2.5 million copies sold worldwide.
That's double gold, isn't it?
Yeah, there was, so in a couple different countries, it went double platinum in one country, it went platinum in 3 other countries, and gold in 4 other countries.
That's good.
You know what? I had that up. But yeah, I remember like in 7 countries it went gold or platinum or double platinum, and it was
nice.
a crazy success. Going back to the movie connection part of it here, the one that I want to talk about next is the name of the song is literally called "Trash in the Camp."
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
And for those of you that haven't seen the movie, at this one point, Tarzan is he's off by himself because they had just all heard gunshots in the distance. And all the gorillas all ran one way, and Tarzan went to explore and look on his own. This is when he first meets Jane.
Yeah.
And while the gorillas are off, they're walking around trying to get away from it. They come across this camp, and we find out there's these people exploring, trying to find gorillas to study them, and then there's the bad guy, and it's a whole different thing. But they come across this camp, and they monkey see, monkey do, no pun intended. They all kind of they tear everything up, and not like in a malicious way, just. They don't know any better because they're animals from not human society, and they go, and they start making music with all these things in the movie.
Yeah.
And when I came across this, I'm like, yeah, no way is that just normal instrumentation.
Yeah.
So, of course, there are like very obvious brass, and maybe like a bari sax in there.
Okay.
And there is a drum set.
Okay.
And obviously voice, but. I looked this up, and I found a video of them performing it live. Phil Collins and Rosie O'Donnell, who was also in the movie, found them performing it live on the Rosie O'Donnell show in, I think, 2000.
Okay.
Or late 99.
Okay.
And on the show, and it sounds pretty close to what's in the movie, not only are they using those, but there are metal pots, metal pans, and metal pitchers, clay jugs, and coffee mugs. So not only are they using your run-of-the-mill instruments, they are using household things to make the sound for the household things that are in the movie, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then this was another favorite of mine. The next one in chronological order in the movie it's called Strangers Like Me.
It's a good song.
Yes.
Yeah. And
one thing, right after the movie, you had said to me there was one, and I had to look up the name of it.
Yeah.
That it just straight up sounds like a Phil Collins or like a late Genesis song.
Yeah.
And that one, as we're watching the movie, I'm thinking, this one isn't super specific to the movie.
Yeah.
Like, it very, very easily could have been like a hit on its own without being part of the Tarzan soundtrack.
Yeah.
In fact, I just told you I just added it to my playlist on Spotify today. It is a great tune. It's a love song. Did you have any other thoughts on that one?
That might be my favorite song out of all of them. I'd listened to Son of Man a bunch of times just on my own, because if I'm in a mood, I'll just put on Disney songs every once in a while. So I like that. Son of Man I've listened to scores of times. I hadn't heard of Strangers Like Me after having seen the movie however long ago, about what you had said, several years until then, and I'm like, oh, this is maybe a better song than that one. That one, it very much has that sense of adventure that the other ones do.
Yeah.
But this isn't necessarily a criticism of it. Quite a few of these songs, especially the first one that we spoke about, it was Two Worlds, One Heart or something like that, the first version of that.
Which comes back two more times throughout the movie.
It's a leitmotif, but the first version of it is very on the nose. He's singing about what's happening while it's happening.
Exactly.
There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it is something that I picked up on, and Strangers Like Me does not. It's like, I want to know, can you show me, is really the chorus from it.
Yeah.
But it's, well, they're going through slideshows and Tarzan's learning the ropes of what human society is.
Yeah.
Something I found interesting with this, if you look at Jane and then specifically Clayton, the two, Jane is Tarzan's love interest and Clayton is the bad guy who's out to kill and ship off for display in a zoo the gorillas that are Tarzan's family. Jane is more or less Deborah Carr, to the point where I think I said it out loud when watching the movie. I'm like, this is just her. My mother's a big Deborah Carr fan, so I'm familiar with her work. And she did a movie I saw a while back called King Solomon's Mines.
Okay.
It's like 95% the same character.
Okay.
Sounds about the same, is dressed very similarly. She's on a safari adventure. I think I've shown you part of it.
Yeah.
So very much Deborah Carr feels like who they've modeled Jane off of. And Clayton feels like either Montgomery Clift or Errol Flynn, who were two really, really big 1930s movie stars. So what I found interesting is they have as the primary antagonist and the person who's really you're not rooting for at all, more or less a version of an actor that would have played Tarzan in the 30s.
Yeah.
So I want to give them a little bit of credit. In this movie, they're at least slyly saying, hey, we know that these portrayals were not really correct back in the day. We know there are some issues with this. We're moving forward from that, and we have a more fleshed out Tarzan.
And also, like I said, we can all, read into it however way we want to.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we want to think of it as it being like a whole commentary on society and, go ahead. For me personally, I just think it's a good story.
Sure. I think based on the subject material, that's inescapable, and especially at the time it was written and where it was written, because I want to say Edgar Rice Burroughs was English.
Yeah.
And the map of the world in 1912, all you need to do is look at that and see that some things were very much not right.
Yep.
And that does take place in the movie. They don't really focus on it too much, but that is something you need to keep in mind when you're watching the movie, if you're doing due diligence. And I understand it is, a good story about learning to family and accept people.
Exactly.
Yep. Absolutely. But it is worth looking at the broader picture of this.
So we're about out of time here, so we got to wrap this up. So my final remarks here are going to be, first of all, if you haven't seen that movie, it is almost a Disney classic.
Mm-hmm.
So I highly recommend it. And if you're looking for something new to listen to, the soundtrack is great. It's on Spotify. It's on YouTube. One more thing I want to say before we run out of time is I don't know how Nickelodeon didn't get sued for George of the Jungle. I know you said something about public domain, but both of those came out before the public domain would have been covered because public domain's 100 years.
It's actually 95, but that's fair. I didn't think about that.
So, but anywho, off my soapbox. Anything to say?
That's a fair question. I didn't actually think about that because we spoke about this off camera. I don't know. That's very interesting. If you like Phil Collins, you'll like the movie. It's a fun movie. Some parts of it I wasn't the hugest fan of, but not every movie's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Obviously. It's late 90s, early 2000s Disney. I like Mulan a lot more. That's my favorite Disney movie, I think.
Yeah.
If we're just speaking in general. It's still a great movie. We enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's not too incredibly long.
One more fun fact, and then we really do have to get going.
Okay.
Here. You told me this.
Okay.
When the animators wanted to figure out how to make Tarzan slide on the vines, what did they look at?
They looked at Tony Hawk.
And there you go. There's your fun fact for the week, guys. Listen, we hope y'all enjoyed. Hope to see y'all here next week. And that is it. We're out of here.
Have a great night. Thank you.